So today we're going to be talking about pots. Now again, I'm just going to say up front, I'm definitely no expert on this, but I just want to share the little bit of knowledge I do have, and basically the things that I've experienced with pots and how I work around some of that. So let's jump straight in. So when first getting a bonsai, or a pre-bonsai as we're talking here, it's often very tempting to throw it straight into a pot. Now that is not the right thing to do, because it will stunt the growth of your tree, and depending on the time of the year it may also kill your tree. So a tree like I've got here that's already starting to get a little bit of shape in it, it's only a couple of months old, it is good to leave it in the bigger pot for a while and just let it grow, like at least a year I'm talking, maybe longer, or even put it in the ground. But when it comes to selecting a pot, we've got various things to choose from. We've got different sizes, colours, different shapes, different heights and widths. Material, that one's just a straight plastic pot, so we call them trainer pots typically. And then we start to get into the design of the feet, how rugged it is, the edges, the colours, those sorts of things. Whether it has a glaze on it or it's just a matte finish, a natural finish. And shapes, which are often known as whether it's feminine or masculine. So while I've got this one in my hand, I'm just going to say straight up, pots like this, while they may look pretty, they're not a great bonsai pot, because when you come to replanting in a year or two, the roots will have grown into this curve, and getting it out can be quite difficult. You've physically got to cut all the way around that rim and cut through some of the roots just to remove it from the pot, and you may actually end up breaking or tipping the pot in the process. So I don't recommend that style. Some rule of thumbs about selecting a pot size. So this is strongly influenced by the style of your tree. So if you're doing a tree similar to what I've got going on here, you basically want to choose a pot that's roughly 2/3 the final height of your tree. So a pot like this, if I stand that up against my tree, I know you can't quite see the top of my tree, but that's possibly a little bit too big. Bearing in mind I will gain some trunk when I replant that, but it's around the size I'd be looking for, maybe at the moment a little bit on the big side. But where I may have troubles is my tree's root system may need more depth than that, and that can be impacted by how much you can physically trim the root system, which will be determined by the tree type, or it can also be determined by your moisture content requirement. So if you're in a position where you can water once or twice a day during the hotter periods, might be a great pot. But if you're going to have situations where you may not be able to water for a couple of days, it's probably not the best pot, because it's going to dry out really quickly. So it may be better to choose something a little bit deeper that will hold some more soil and subsequently more moisture. So that's a consideration when choosing a pot. And in depth, we can go, that's probably about the same depth as the last one, but we can go deeper and even deeper again. So it really depends on your particular situation with the water requirements of the plant and how much you're going to be able to give it water during your times away. Now when we're talking about a pot, the style of the tree can be considered masculine or feminine. So if it's got gentle swaying curves, it's considered feminine. If it's fairly harsh and got some a lot of grinding and gins, then it's probably more likely considered a masculine pot. So a feminine pot is something like this, where it's got nice soft curves, soft edges, whereas a more masculine pot is something like this, where we have quite hard edges, so they're almost 90 degrees and often a a strong rim, strong feet, that sort of thing on it. So that can influence your decision as well. Once we've chosen the pot we're going to put our tree in, the positioning needs to be considered. So we'll be covering more of this next week in the actual potting session, but you wouldn't typically go dead center when you're putting your tree into your pot. You would normally offset it a little bit to one side. So because of the way this one's leaning, I would probably offset it to the side I've got there, and more likely towards the back of the pot than the front. So they're just considerations when you're choosing the size. So your branches will typically want to extend slightly over the sides of the pot, the width of the pot, or if it's a rounded top tree, basically you're more likely to have a round pot where it would be the canopy of the tree will be slightly bigger than the pot itself. Choosing the colour of your pot is a lot to do with personal decision, personal preference, but something that you can follow as a bit of a guideline is if you've got a tree like this that has some dark maroony red sort of colours in it, you may want to choose a pot that is the complementary colour, and I'll bring up a colour wheel in a moment to give an example of that. If it's a plant that flowers, you may want to choose a pot that matches the flower colour or complements the flower colour. So it's a very personal thing, and it's probably far more artistic than what my mindset works with. But yeah, I'll just throw up some examples in the video in a moment of how to match colours to colour wheels and those sorts of things. So for me, who isn't all that good at choosing and matching colours, I use this online software called Coloradobe.com, and that allows me to choose colours from a photo. So I've already taken a photo of my tree, and I can place my colours into the areas where I'm interested in matching. So we'll choose some of the reds, the trunk, and just some of the general leaf colours. So there's try and see if we can get something a bit different between those two. So we choose that, and then I'll go back to my colour wheel, and you'll see the colours have come in there. And what I can do is select these different colour modes. So I'm going to choose complementary, and it's chosen colours that will complement what we had before. So I could go with any of these shades and they should be a match for what I had. And currently it's basing that match as the primary being this browny red sort of colour. So from that we can go through and choose any photo we like and basically choose colours of a pot that are going to complement our plant. Or if you're just good at choosing these things, just go out and choose it the old-fashioned way. Other things to consider in a pot are the drainage. So if you buy a pot that has just a single drainage hole such as that, and it's quite small, smaller than that, you may find that it's not enough drainage for your plant. So you should be looking for a reasonable size and number of drainage holes, and even better still is if you have separate tie down holes. So you might find you've got smaller holes in your pot that you can actually use to tie down. So it might be a bit hard for you to see here, but this pot has it's a printed pot, but drainage holes there, and then down here and up here we have separate holes that we can thread wire through to tie down. So that will just make it easier to secure your plant. This one here, which I actually just got when I did a bulk lot of pots from someone, is not a good example of a pot. For starters, the base is physically attached as a water drip tray, which means it's pretty much impossible for me to get in and do a tie down on that. It's only got the one drainage hole, so this is not a good example of what you'd use as a bonsai pot. Okay, so I hope that's helped you out with choosing your pots, and next week we'll look at how to go about taking your plant from a pot like this, thinning out the roots, what season to do it in, what soils to sort of jump into, and the finishing off touches of your pot so that your plant has the best chance of survival. Alright, thanks for watching.